Let's do it. All right. It looks like we are ready to rock and roll. Just close all this down here and get ready as people start streaming in. Just give it a few minutes for all the technology to kick in. Okay, it looks like we are live everywhere. Now we are ready to go. All right, everybody. First and foremost, welcome to season 2 of the Evolution of Business show. I'm your host, as always, Dave Clare, and today I am very excited to kick off season 2 live here on LinkedIn with none other than Garry Ridge, Chairman and CEO of the WD-40 company. Now, Garry, which we'll introduce shortly, he'll have a chance to have a chat with us today. Garry joined WD-40 back in 1987 and has held various leadership positions in the company before being appointed to CEO in 1997. He's also an adjunct professor at the University of San Diego, where he teaches leadership development, talent management, and succession planning in the Master of Science in Executive Leadership program. He is passionate about the learning and empowering culture that he has helped establish at the WD-40 company. In 2009, he actually co-authored a book with Ken Blanchard outlining his effective leadership techniques titled Helping People Win at Work. Now, as a leader, there's nothing more than we can do that's more powerful than helping your people win at work. So looking forward to learning more about that. Actually, you may not know this, but Garry is a native of Australia and holds a certificate in modern retailing and wholesale distribution and a Master of Science in Executive Leadership from the University of San Diego. As CEO of the WD-40 company since 1997, Garry has helped reignite excitement and create cultures that foster breakthrough innovation in companies and workplaces in over 62 countries. His firsthand experiences in transforming a global brand with a market cap of $2.3 billion, as well as his own deep, profound commitment to creating workplace cultures that support the individual passions of all who work there, have attracted the recognition of today's most influential thought leaders. In 2016, he was named Igniter of the Year by Simon Sinek, and Inc.com placed him in the 4th position in its list of top 10 global CEOs in 2017. Garry has also received a Lifetime Achievement Award in Freedom at Work from WordBlue, and most recently, he's a contributor in the Marshall Goldsmith Francis Hesselbein book, Work is Love Made Visible, a collection of essays about the power of finding your purpose from the world's greatest thought leaders. Now, I could not think of a better guest to kick off season 2 here on the Evolution of Business show than Garry Ridge. Welcome to the show, Garry.
Hey, g'day, Dave. Thank you. I should have given you the real thing to read. I'm the consciously incompetent, probably wrong, and roughly right CEO and chairman of WD-40 company. So it's great to be with you today.
That is awesome, man. I tell you, I like that. Certainly speaks to your humility, mate. I appreciate that because I think that's how sometimes a lot of us got to be, where we're the consciously incompetent. Very powerful way to think about ourselves. Hey, now, like, this is really cool because I got introduced to you by Professor Darren Martin. Darren Martin. I've got Garry Martin over here and Darren Martin over there. Darren Martin, and he just sung your praises about the great work that you've been doing, obviously with WD-40, but also from a company culture point of view. As I'm ambassador for the Global Company Culture Association, it's just amazing to see the work that you've done in that space. And I'm really looking forward to you sharing your story with everybody here. We got a whole bunch of people jumping in. So if you'd like to just take like 10, 15 minutes or whatever time you need to just share, how did you get to be where you are, and why is this deep, rich passion for people? And because I find in the world today, most of what we call leadership is just modern management practices. I think we've lost the art of leadership in a lot of places. So when we have an opportunity with someone like yourself to share that, one of the biggest battles that certainly I fight with organizations here is to get them to really understand that it's all about people. And
yeah, thanks.
I know you've done great work there. So
thanks, Dave. One thing that I'm absolutely convinced of is pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And Aristotle actually wrote that, and he was born in 384 BC. So, we're pretty slow learners, because if our role really is to create a place where people go to work every day, they make a contribution to something bigger than themselves, they learn something new, they feel safe and are protected by a compelling set of values, and they go home happy. Because happy people build happy families build happy communities, and happy communities build a happy world. And by God, we need a happy world. So for me, the journey started, I grew up in Sydney, Australia. As you said, I'm an Aussie, in a little suburb of Sydney called Five Dock. I went to Drummoyne Boys High School. When I left school, I went and worked as a management trainee for a retail chain in those days called Waltons. And that's where I really started my management career. Anyhow, I only ever applied for one job in my life, and that was the one at Waltons. And from that, I went to work. I was offered to work with a company that was a wholesaler, and eventually I ended up at a company called Hawker Pacific, which was part of the Hawker Siddeley Group in Australia. They were then the licensees for WD-40 and another brand called Armour All and a few other things. And with that association, I got to travel to the United States probably once a year to attend both the national meeting for WD-40 company and the Armour All company. And that's where I met the guys at WD-40. And in 1987, WD-40 was starting to get serious about really expanding their global footprint. We'd been in Australia with a licensee. We had some licensees in other areas around the world. The license was coming to an end with Hawker, and I got a phone call one day from one of the senior people at WD-40 company in the United States, and it kind of went like this: "Hey, Garry, it's Jerry." "Oh, hi, Jerry. How are you?" "Hey, as you know, we're thinking about starting a subsidiary in Australia, and we wondered whether you would think about joining WD-40 company." Well, my dad was an engineer, and I remember saying to Dad, "Hey, Dad, WD-40 have asked me to join them and start their Australian operation." And Dad said, "You can't go wrong with that stuff, son." So I guess Dad was right. So on July 4th, 1987, with a fax machine under my bed, I opened WD-40 Company Australia. And for the next 6 months, we put the infrastructure together. We opened for business on January 1, 1988. And I was responsible for the Australian and Asia Pacific market. We were looking at how we were going to take the product into more countries in Asia. I remember probably taking the first can of WD-40 into China. In those days, you had to catch a train in Hong Kong that took you to Canton. You got off at Canton. There was no currency. There's only one hotel to stay in. Our competitor was dirty diesel oil, ignorance, and a hammer in China in those days. So I was doing that. I was doing that job from 87 through to 94. And I was having an update call with my then boss, the president of WD-40 company, one day. And I said, "Look, is there anything else you'd like me to do? I think I could do some more for the company." He said, "Funny you should ask. Would you be interested in moving to the United States?" And I said, "To do what?" He said, "Well, we really need someone who's committed to taking the blue and yellow can with a little red top to the world. You seem to know a little bit about some international marketing. Would you consider moving here and heading up our international expansion?" And I said, "Wow, talk about disrupt yourself." My good friend Whitney Johnson wrote a book called Disrupt Yourself. This was an ultimate disruption. I was going to pick up and move to a new country. So I did that in 1994. 3 years later, he retired. And for my sins, I guess, the board of directors said, "How about you leading the company?" I said, "Well, what does a one-time traveling salesman from Australia know about leading a public company?" And they said, "Well," fortunately, that was what was really my strength. I didn't know. And it was at that time that I looked around and I said, I have to really understand how we can create a culture in this organization that really respected the fact that micromanagement was not scalable. And if we're going to build, back then we were only about $100 million in revenue, and 80% of our business was in the United States. We had a market cap of about 300 million as a public company. How are we going to change that? So I looked around and I went back to school. That's where I went and did my master's degree in leadership, where I met my mentor, my dear friend now, Ken Blanchard, the 1 Minute Manager. He was one of my professors. We wrote our book together. And a few things became clear to me. Micromanagement wasn't scalable. And I learned the three most important words I've ever learned in my life. And they are, I don't know. And I got really comfortable with those three words. And that's why today I say, in most situations, I am probably wrong and roughly right. I'm not the smartest knife in the drawer at all. However, I can make sure that I get people around me that are clear. So the journey started back then as the CEO. Today, we're north of $400 million in revenue. Our market cap is actually now $3.5 billion. So it's 10 times the value that it was. And that's US dollars. So probably about 5 billion.
10 billion Australian.
Yeah. We now have 65% of our business outside of the United States. But the thing that I'm most proud of is our employee engagement. You know, I believe that culture is values plus behavior times consistency. And our employee engagement is 93%. I've been tracking it for 20 years, and 98% of our people say they love to work at our company. 97% of our people say they respect their coach. We don't have managers. Everybody's a coach here because we live our mission of, we're not here to mark your paper. We're here to help you get an A. The job of a leader is to help people succeed. And that's why we've been successful. And never has it been more powerful than going through COVID. You know, having a strong culture, we've been drawing down on our cultural equity. I don't have a job. I don't believe what I do is a job at all. You know, what I do is I have a purpose. And my purpose in life is to make people happy. If I can't make them happy, I don't want to hurt them. And our job is to create a place where people thrive and love to do what they do. I am here to serve. That's what a leader's there to do, is to serve. So it's been an amazing journey so far, 33 years with the company, growing, learning every day. I just love to learn. We don't make mistakes at WD-40 Company. We have learning moments, and a learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared with others. I created a character. This is the character. Yeah. This is Al. Al is the soul-sucking CEO, or the soul-sucking leader. And unfortunately, there's a lot of leaders out there that suck the soul out of people, and that's why there's such lousy employee engagement. And Al has a set of habits that are very unacceptable. He doesn't respect his people. He doesn't involve them. He doesn't do what he says he's going to do. You know, he's the king of the castle. He's at that hierarchy place in his business. You know, he always blames others. He always has all the answers, all the things that don't motivate people. So that's the story of a Aussie from Five Dog.
Well, we could probably just about end it right there, Garry, because that was epic in its own right. But a couple of key things. I love what you said about, you know, micromanagement isn't scalable. I used to work for an organization many years ago, and I used to say to my boss, I said, "You're not a micromanager," and he thought it was a compliment. And I said, "No, you're a nano manager." You know, like it was so every tiny little detail. And wouldn't then obviously it makes it difficult for people to become their best and do their life's best work when you're micromanaging them, or in his case, nano managing them. But that, can you repeat that for me again? I think you said values plus behavior times consistency. Is that?
Culture equals, and the equals sign means what happens when. So culture happens when, parentheses, values plus behavior, close parentheses, times consistency. That's how you build a strong culture. So the values are there in an organization to both protect and set people free. We have a hierarchical set of values in our company. The first value is more powerful than the last one. Our first value is we value doing the right thing. Our second value is we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. So there's 6 of them. The last one is we value creating, sustaining the WD-40 economy. So values, what are the boundaries that help people be what they need to be? In behavior, Leaders need to love their people enough and be
Yep.
brave and courageous enough to not only applaud and cheer on great behavior, but to redirect behavior that isn't working in the organization. And close the parentheses, they need to do that consistently, day after day after day after day.
Correct.
You know,
Yeah.
this is simple. It's not
Mm.
easy, and time is not your friend. But you have
Correct.
to be committed to it day after day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is from a leadership point of view, and we'll get into a bunch more questions, but I think this is really important for anybody watching or listening to this. Like that values piece, I mean, to me, purpose is what drives you, gets you out of bed every morning, but your values are what are there to guide you and your team of it. It's about how we think around here, not what to think, but it's how to think. So that's where that freedom allows them that freedom to think within a framework. I love that values plus behavior in the parenthesis, because values is the thinking, and how we think determines how we act. So the team that wins is the one that outbehaves the other one, right? And which then where the consistency comes in. And I think but the simplicity, and for me, which is beautiful, because simplicity is my number one core value, which is freedom from complexity. And that's why my book's called Simplified. But it's all about that. How do we help leaders to understand the simple formulas to help people become the best version of themselves, to do their life's best work while they're in our care and beyond? And that means, about carrying them as a human being first and an employee second.
Yeah,
And
as you know,
do
Bob
that.
Chapman from Barry Weinmiller says, everybody who walks in your door today is someone's precious child.
Yeah.
So we have no right to get in the way of people doing great work. What our job is to help them do great work. That's when I said my purpose statement, which is something the Dalai Lama said years ago, which was, my purpose in life is to make people happy. If I can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. And that's why that's why we're servant leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. One of the other things you talked about, and this is certainly, 2 years ago, I was preparing for a keynote for the future of leadership, the future of work, which is quite funny, but that event never ended up going ahead. But all my notes and everything that I'd done on my research and everything like that, thinking about the future and, is what I now call the present of work, because if anything, it's forced a lot of this stuff upon most leadership, or challenged a lot of leaders to be like this. But you talk about coaches, not bosses. And I think that is one of the real big things today, is that people want coaches, not bosses anymore. And this, because it creates like what I call an ecosystem when you have boss subordinate. But when you build an ecosystem of leadership where you're nurturing new leaders by coaching your team up, I think that's one of the most powerful things that leaders listening today could start to embrace, is think of themselves more as a coach rather than a boss.
And, think about a coach, right? A great coach spends their time on the sideline and in the locker room.
Yep.
You don't see the coach running onto the paddock, grabbing the ball in the middle of the game. That's not what they do. And most importantly, when the game is over and the prize is being given, the coach never goes to the podium. They're there in the background applauding those that did what they needed to do. So again, our job as a coach is to help people step into the best new version of their personal self on a daily basis. That's why we're there. And if we can help people raise their game consistently, then the end game is going to be beautiful. As you mentioned, Simon Sinek's latest book is called The Infinite Game. Simon's a friend of mine, and he talks about having courageous teams, but also having the courage to lead. And most leaders fail for one reason: their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego. Their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And if anyone's listening, like, please understand, and this is where, and that's why I think that when you think about, leadership the way it was or the way it currently is, and the shift that needs to happen, is that most people are hanging on to the title of leadership, which is the ego, right? And understand that they're there to, as you've already mentioned numerous times, to be of service to their team. I get I give a lot of crap to a lot of people when they start talking about having staff. I hate the word staff. I just hate it. And I was talking to a large organization yesterday, and they're like, "Oh, but our staff." I said, "Please understand, staff are the servants, the maids, the butlers." And I said, if anyone in this organization is the staff, it's you, because it's your job to serve your team. So please, let's stop calling our people staff. They're not there to serve you. You're there to serve them. And when
Absolutely.
you
And one of the
get
biggest desires, one of the
sorry,
biggest desires we have as a human being is to belong. If you
yes,
think about Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization, the first two rungs of that are, do I have what I need to survive and am I safe? The third one is love or belonging. And this is where most organizations let down. That's why at WD-40 Company, we call ourselves a tribe, not a
yeah,
team. And
yeah,
interestingly enough, I studied the the behaviors of the indigenous Australians and the Fijian Islanders, looking
yeah,
at what behaviors did they have in harsh times that kept them together. The
yeah,
number one responsibility of a tribal leader is to be a learner and a teacher. Give you the example. If we were to go back thousands of years and be in the middle of Australia, around Uluru, watching
yeah,
a group of Aborigines there, what would the leader be doing? He'd be teaching them to throw a boomerang or a woomera. Why? Because if they couldn't throw a boomerang or a woomera, they wouldn't survive. So our
right,
job, the number one responsibilities we have as a tribal leader is to be a learner and a teacher. That's why I
yeah,
love teaching at the University of San Diego. I learn more there than anywhere else because
yeah.
I'm in the presence of others.
Yeah, isn't that powerful? When you did that study, did you? Because I did a lot of studying that too when I was looking to articulate my what I call the circle of organizational leadership. So my model is much about having a purpose in the center and our values, and everyone having a direct line of sight. And I did a lot of research and looking at the talking circles and the tribal circles that they had, where to resolve conflict and to achieve things and working together. Did you do any study, or did you find anything about like those sort of the circles
Yeah,
in the?
we have, if you think about what I see as the attributes of the circles, that it's learning and teaching. The
Mm,
second one is values. The third one is belonging. Then
yeah,
there's a focus, there's skill, there's warriors, and there's celebration.
yeah,
And each one of those has its own unique place in this tribal circle, if you will.
yeah, yeah. And I think, and that's like, so instead of having this hierarchical structure, instead I build like an ecosystem of leadership rather than that
Right.
ego system of leadership. And then if you have that ecosystem where the coach sits in the head of one of the head, like there's one of the circle, their job is to help obviously everybody to stay aligned to that sense of belonging and to why we're all here and through the lens of those values and how we can all think, and then coach their team or their tribe to be the best that they can be and achieve the objectives that they're all set out to work on personally and professionally. um,
Absolutely.
and I think one of the challenges I find is that that's probably one of the harder concepts for leaders to start to embrace, is a psychological shift from saying you report to me instead of no, my job here is to help coach you and lift you up and build you up. And I think when we can start helping make that shift, you've already seen it yourself. So I'm preaching to the choir. I appreciate, but the transformation that you start to see in the people around you and yourself as a leader is phenomenal when you're willing to let go of the ego and help build the eco.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, that's why one of our measures is, and I think I shared it with you, 97% of
yeah,
our tribe globally say they respect their coach, not like their boss.
yeah,
64% of people in the United States would take a pay cut if they could fire their boss.
yeah, yeah. Like how crazy those stats is. Like that's so bad. But
67% of people who go to work every day are either disengaged or actively disengaged. Whose fault
yeah,
is that? I'll show you.
yeah, yeah. That type A stands for something else as well. We'll leave that. um, so, Garry, obviously, this is the evolution of business show. One of the things I challenge people on is that the growth. A lot of people talk about grow your business, grow yourself, and which growth is important. Don't get me wrong, but I work focus on evolution. That if we're not constantly evolving, you can grow into obscurity or irrelevance. And as we've seen, many large organizations grow into obscurity and irrelevance because they didn't evolve. And so I certainly challenge those two concepts. And for me, if you look at Darwin's theories, obviously it's not the fastest, the fittest, the strongest, the smartest that survive of the species. It's the one that's most able to adapt, as I've tweaked a little bit, to their ever-changing environment. So because our environment's not changing, it's ever changing. And so I always like to ask our guests is, how do you discern the difference between growth and evolution? Like, share your thoughts on what you think is growth and what you think is evolution,
Well,
please.
I think it comes back to, are you playing the finite game or the infinite game? We're playing the infinite game. Our job is to build an enduring company over time. And to do that, you've got to have learning agility. You've got to have a very, very comfortable understanding of saying, I don't know. It's
Mm.
okay. And you've got to open the organization to consistent learning. We are a consistent learner. There was a great book that was written. You've probably read it, called "Who Moved My Cheese."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There was a sequel to that called "Out of the Maze," and "Out of the Maze" talks about one thing: why do I believe this to be true? So the question we have to always be asking ourselves is, why do I believe this to be true? It may have been true yesterday, but it
Mm.
may not be true today, and by no one's fault has it not true today. So leaders have to be curious in a way that people are comfortable with curiosity, so they're not seeing it as being critical. There's a difference between being critical and curious, but you've got to
Mm.
have that continual curiosity about what's changing around us. Look at the world today.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? I was in Italy in March when this thing blew up, and I was on my way to meetings in London, and I had to fly back, and suddenly virtual became compulsory. If we weren't able to adapt to that, I think in times of real and great need, people can pivot around fear, and one of the things that stops a lot of us is fear.
Yeah.
So again, I think learning agility is really important, and from that will come growth.
Yep. So basically, and that's beautiful, because, like I said, like, evolution should be the natural state of your business. It's the natural state of us as human beings. Should be the natural state of your business, and you will have growth on the back of evolution being the natural state. But when your business is only just built for growth and there's no evolution happening, and same as for us as individuals, you do more with more. And I love that, the finite versus the infinite. One of the things I love what you talked about there was, why do I believe this to be true? Because the beliefs that we hold, whether in our business or our industry or even in ourselves, were just either ideas or concepts that served us at a certain time and served us in a great way. But we never stop to ask, or rarely do people stop to ask, or businesses stop to ask, is it serving us today? And will it
Hmm.
serve us going forward into tomorrow? Because we held on to that truth from back then, to your point. And if you don't have that depth of curiosity, well, and I love what you said about being comfortable with the curiosity. Right? Curious doesn't mean we have to change anything either, but we should be asking the questions and challenging.
People probably won't remember this, but I remember it vividly. I don't know if back in Australia years ago, there was a guy called Professor Julius Sundermiller. He
Yeah,
was, in
yeah.
fact, the guy that did the Cadbury's chocolates ads, right?
Just a glass and a half of milk. Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, though, he really made an impression on me, because I'd come home from school, and he
Yeah.
would be on TV doing these crazy scientific
Yeah.
experiments. He'd suck an egg into a bottle, and I don't
Yeah.
know if you remember what his last words were on every experiment. He'd say, "Why is it so?
Oh, that's right. Yes, yes.
Why?
Why is it
Why
so?
is it so? Why is
Yeah.
it so?"
Yeah.
And I've taken that with me through life, because I keep asking, why is that so? Why is it like that?
Yeah.
Why? And again, it's being curious, not critical.
Yeah.
And that's why I love being consciously incumbent. One of the great things for me was when I moved to the United States. I could be that stupid Aussie who doesn't know anything, and I felt in my element, because I don't understand this. Why is it like that? I don't know
Yeah.
why that is. Please forgive me. I don't know.
By Jingo, by Crocky, I'm not too sure about this one. The
Yeah, by doing it.
and it's so cool. The one of I have these little quirky quotes called clarisms, and one of them is, "Isness is the death of your business." And that's because, like, how many times you get told, "Dave, that's just the way it is in our industry. That's just the way it is in our business." And I'm like, but why? Much the same as you when I came over as the unknowing Canadian. And I've always joked a lot even to my clients today that, I made a living out of not knowing,
Mm-hmm.
because I ask questions that most people wouldn't, because I'm not enriched into their beliefs about the way things should be.
Interesting you should say that. One of the things we have at our company, I don't know if you've heard it, is called the Maniac Pledge.
No.
Have you heard it? Okay, so
No.
let me tell you this. This is
Maniac
the pledge we all take. This is part of the quirkiness of our culture. Here's what it says. I am responsible for taking action, asking questions, getting answers, and making decisions. I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I am responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended that I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I am responsible for telling them. That's our Maniac Pledge. We all take that pledge.
And is that somewhere where people can see that, like outside of WD-40, or is that just sort of like just an internal?
No, it's out there. It's probably up on my website somewhere.
I'll take a look at it, and I'll put a link there, because that's the epitome of everything that, what we want from people is like
give them
be
permission
about what they're doing,
and give them permission.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many, two simple things that have changed the way we think at the company. Number one was the adoption of the learning moment. And the definition of the learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that has to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. So people at WD-40 Company don't say, I made a mistake. People don't want to yell out, I failed. But every day in thousands of conversations in this company say, you know what, I had a learning moment. I want to share it with you. Here's my learning moment. And they can say it and feel comfortable that they're going to be applauded for it. The second thing was the Maniac Pledge, where we said, you know what, I am responsible. I am going to take the responsibility for this.
Yeah. And so powerful. And and I know Simon talks a lot about it in his books and his work, but creating that safe environment where people feel safe to be able to have learning moments and express those learning moments openly.
The circle of safety.
Yeah, and that's right. And let's say, so when you're from that tribal circle and everything like that, whatever way you want to look at it, if you're allowing your people to feel safe, but and how important are those learning moments in an organization? Like, Garry, you just produce stuff that makes things come unstuck. That's all you guys do. So what do you need all this freedom to think for? What do you need all this crap for, mate? It's the same it's the 40th rendition of this scientific formula that finally worked. That's all you guys do. So why do you need your people to be like this?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that. I was talking to Marshall Goldsmith the other day, and he talks about how we have one of the highest employee engagement numbers on the planet, and we just sell oil in a can. He said he's got clients who are, heads of hospitals that save lives, and they don't have such high employee engagement. But we don't sell oil in a can. Our purpose is we exist to create positive, lasting memories in everything we do. We solve problems, we make things work smoothly, and we create opportunities. That's our why statement.
Yeah.
How we do that is important. We create positive, lasting memories by cultivating a tribal culture of learning and teaching, which produces a highly engaged workforce who live our company's values every day. So if you think about the will of the people and the strategy, let's say the will of your people on a score to 1 to 100 is 10, and your strategy on a score to 1 to 100 is 50. 10, the will of the people, times 50, the effectiveness of the strategy, gives you an outcome of 500. But let's say the will of the people is 80 and your strategy is 50. 80 times 50 is 4,000. So you can have the best strategy you ever had in the world. But if the will of the people isn't there, if they're not feeling that they're respected, they're there to help, you're there to help them win, not help them lose, then they're not going to do their best work. Pleasure in the job. Remember what Aristotle said. Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. Oh, duh.
Yeah, I know. Like we're pretty slow learners here. Right? Like this is not rocket science, and it's not. And all the gurus of the world have talked about it. Richard Branson talks about take care of your employees, they'll take care of the customers, and everything like that. And it's quite fascinating to me. So I want to roll into your own personal evolution, because I really believe that our role as leaders is to be the best version of ourselves, so we can do our life's best work. Because when we become the best version of ourselves, it allows our people to become the best version of themselves, and then that allows us to provide the best to our clients, because our clients deserve us all at our best. All right. So if you reflect back on your own journey, And you may have already shared part of it or anything like that. And please feel free to expand on it. When do you think your most significant personal evolution was of yourself in leadership or in life?
When I moved to the United States was certainly a pivot for me. When I became really aware of how much I didn't know, and I got really comfortable with it. As I said, the three most important words I've ever learned is I don't know. And if I hadn't have moved to the United States, that would never have happened to me because, I was doing pretty well in Australia. I knew a lot of people. I got here, and you drive on the wrong side of the road, and
I know.
you walk on the wrong side of the footpath, and people don't understand the words you use, and it was like, whoa, I feel really disrupted here. I feel insecure. And then I went, wait a minute. Oh. And I'll give you an example of what happened to me, which was lovely. Now that I look at it, I was in a meeting, and I was not yet the CEO. I just got here, and I was in a meeting in our offices here in San Diego, and there was someone from outside the company giving us a presentation about something. And they started off, and they were talking, and they went on for about 10 or 15 minutes. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, you know what? I have no clue what you're talking about. I am so confused by what you're saying. This is of no value. And I kind of put up my hand. I said, excuse me, I'm sorry. Not long in this country, but I don't have any clue what you're talking about. Guess what happened, Dave? Everybody in the room went,
oh, thank
because
you.
They,
else said
they were in the same position, my goodness. And it's like, okay, so if you're brave enough to be able to admit that you don't know and then find out, then that works. So, that was a huge pivot. And then going to back to school and meeting Ken Blanchard. And, I'm just so grateful that I have had mentors like Ken Blanchard, Simon Sinek, Marshall Goldsmith, these people that I've been able to work alongside in development of leadership has been really exciting.
Yeah, no, that's and so well, it's probably not part of the question, but how important are mentors? Like when early in my career, my first mentor outside of my dad or my mom was a guy named John McGinnis, and I wrote about him in my book. And I said, like, it's a powerful mentor. Like John saw something in me I didn't see in myself, and helped me to become the best version of myself and bring that out of me. And actually, a lot of the foundational work that I do today is built on some of the stuff that we did back then that I didn't even really, know that it was. But when I look back now and I go, oh, that's exactly what that was. That's that. That's that. That's that. So how important is it for people to find, the right mentors?
I think it's really important. In the book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, I talk about mentors I had when I was a young kid, working in a hardware store, a sporting goods store, and a dry cleaner back in Australia. And I think that if someone's prepared to invest in you, then you need to respect that investment. And you don't have to do everything, but you need to be open-minded and take it on board. And so I think mentors and there's a difference between a mentor and a coach. They're quite different.
Yeah, absolutely.
A mentor is kind of.
How do you define the difference then in terms of that? Because I'll just quickly share mine. So I always use Tiger Woods as an example. So Tiger Woods had Butch Harmon was his coach, but Jack Nicklaus was his mentor. Jack had been where he wanted to go, and Jack was a wonderful mentor for Tiger, but Butch Harmon was his coach and helped him become the best at his game, where Jack had, and that's how I always explain to people the difference between having a mentor and a coach. But could you share your?
Yeah, I say a coach is a bit like a tugboat.
Yeah.
Helping the big ship move in the directions it needs to go. Watching, the tugboat has the master on board. They know they know kind of the harbor a little better, so they're helping them maneuver through this to get to their final destination. And you'll probably have different coaches. A mentor is kind of there for life, Millie, or for a larger part of your life. And again, is sharing with you some of the deep scars or the learning moments they've had over time. So I think that they both have a place.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. So, if moving from personal evolution then to business evolution, what do you reflect on as the most significant business evolution that you, with WD-40, I would imagine, since you've been there most of your adult life so far, uh, or if there's something else, most significant business evolution you've been a part of?
Helping build a culture that has 93% employee engagement.
Hmm.
Um, I think without that, we wouldn't have 65% of our business outside of the United States now. Taking the blue and yellow can to the world has been is a great experience, and it's not over yet by any means. There's still lots of squeaks in China and lots of rust in Russia, and we're just the boys and girls to take care of that. But
Yeah.
certainly, if I look back, over this 33 years, the thing that I'm most proud of is watching people develop. And I'll give you an example of that.
Yeah.
We opened
Please.
a subsidiary in mainland China just on 14 years ago. So we have our own subsidiary there. And when we opened the subsidiary, I moved the managing director of our Australian operation and his family to Shanghai for 4 years to make sure that we embedded the culture from day one, because it was so important to do that. And our first employee there was a lady by the name of Grace. And Grace came in as an administrative assistant um, as sort of the first office manager or whatever. Anyhow, Grace had a passion to learn. She got really interested in supply chain. We put her through a master's degree in supply chain management at the University of Shanghai. She then got interested in. So fast forward 2 years ago, Grace was appointed country manager China. So there's a person that started with us as an administrative assistant, if you will. And because we were dedicated to helping her get A's and helping her go forward, she's now the manager of one of our fastest growing countries in the world. And those
Wow.
are the sort of things that you look back on. And there are many stories like that within our company. And those are the things you look back on, you go, you know what? That's okay. That's
Mm.
okay. When
Mm.
you put your head down at night, it's not going to be, the best sales day you had. It's going to be, what did you do to just help someone make their own life a little better? Because
Yeah.
life's a gift. We don't want to send it back unwrapped.
No, no, so true. And like, thank you for sharing that. Like, and those are the wonderful, powerful stories that leaders, if you can start to create more of those stories, that's your legacy. That's the work that you do that you remember. For me, like even coming back to Australia, and I've bumped into some people in the streets in Perth, because Perth, if you've been here before, it's like 1 or 2 degrees of separation, not 6 degrees of separation. I remember walking down St. George's Terrace here in Perth when I just came back 10, 11 years ago, and someone stopped me in the street like, Dave. And I'm like, oh, Mike's good to see you again. And he's like, where you been? I'm like, I'm so sorry, because Mike, you would not believe the time that we spent there. Here's what I've done and here's what I've gone. And you're like that's here I am 11 years later. Well, actually, 10, probably about 15 years later that I've been there. And you're hearing these amazing stories about people and what they've accomplished since then, and seeing those young people that you've helped cultivate. One of the interesting things was the way my brain works is a little bit different to most. Is I'm thinking about this whole culture and WD-40 and the evolution, everything like that. The purpose of WD-40, when people use WD-40, is to loosen up stuff that's stuck, that shouldn't be stuck, right? I mean, that's what
Well,
WD, well, technically.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
has a number of different functions. It's a lubricant.
Guys, like we were using it in our car, damn thing won't come undone, so we put the WD-40 on it and it gets unstuck. So like, I think, because I remember reading on your website that there's duct tape, and then all you need in life is duct tape and WD-40, right? Because duct tape to stop things from moving that shouldn't, and WD-40 to move things that aren't, that should be moving. And you think about, like, does everyone get like a little squirt of WD-40 when they come? Like, you loosen up everybody and you free them up so they're not stuck. Because in a culture, I think we find a lot of leaders, with that micromanagement, whatever, people are stuck. They're stuck and then they don't have the capacity or the space to evolve or even grow in the roles that they are, or even as a human being. But you guys seem to loosen everybody up.
So true. But again, we're in the memories business. That's what
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
about. We're about creating positive, lasting memory, because everybody you speak to will say, WD-40, I remember when. I
Yeah.
remember when it made me a hero, when
Yeah.
it, I remember working on my car with my dad. I can still remember the smell. That's
Yeah.
that's the emotion side. So it's
Yeah. 100%.
that's
And
why we say we're in the memories business.
I totally get it, because, like I say, those memorable moments when I couldn't get my car where it goes, and WD-40 helped me get that bolt off to do. Yeah, I fully get, and that's you guys really understanding what it is that you're actually, if you want to say selling, is you're selling those memories to people. And this is even like Kodak. If Kodak remembered that they were there to create Kodak moments, they would have created way more with a digital camera than they would with processing
True,
film, right?
true, true,
It's a really
true.
simple but fundamental lesson for all of us. So thank you. That now, as we're getting closer towards the end here, talk to us about the future. And one of the things I always ask our guests is, what are you looking for? What are you seeing in the future of work, future of leadership? And with the way the world is today, which is be fascinating, and we're already in uncertain times prior to, what's happened in 2020. But now going forward, what are you looking for? What would you advise people to keep their eye out for? Just like the next 3 to 5 years is the next evolution of a lot of organizations is going to come about. What are the things you guys are looking at, you as a CEO or leader?
If leaders haven't learned through this experience that having a culture where people are engaged, they're respected, they're treated with respect and dignity, and they give their best is the survival tool of business, they want to give up now. They want to just let it go, because that's what it's about. So, we're fast. The world is fast changing. It's, this whole COVID roller coaster has been a terrible thing to be on. But on the other side of it, it's been a wonderful learning experience in so many different ways. Virtual has become compulsory. Now, one of the things that we are thinking about a lot is we don't believe that going virtual as a permanent state is a good thing. We're social animals. So we will be better together now because we're also going to be better virtually. So we haven't been in our we call our office a teepee. We haven't been in our teepee since March. We're all missing each other dramatically. We've had to do wonderful things to keep us together, in this virtual. So that's important. The other thing is focus. Opportunities are abundant, but focus is a gift. So, what are you really good at? How are you going to become better at it? It's not about beating your competition. It's about making yourself better every day. Because if you focus on the competition and just beating them, you'll miss your opportunity. So how do you continually make yourself and organizations better every day?
Yeah, no, and I think that's so cool. And the point you raised about like being with the engaged and respected workforce and everything, like you got to imagine, how important culture is like today or like prior to all this stuff that's happened. And how are you going to maintain that sense of feeling, togetherness in a virtual world? Like if your culture isn't already strong and you're not going to focus on making it even stronger or strengthening what you may not have done in the past, then to your point, it's you're going to be in a lot of trouble, because a lot of organizations we're panicking about having to have everyone go work from home. Like, how do I control my people, and how do I make sure they're being productive, and well, firstly, if you have the right culture, none of that should be in question. Like if you've got all that sort of set up, it shouldn't be an issue for you, because if you have your people and they're feeling trusted and they're responsible and they can take ownership for their work and they have freedom to think, and and if we get to the stage where we're really focused on what you put into the hours rather than the hours you put in, because you would know in yourself, and not that WD-40 would probably experience it much, but presenteeism is almost worse than absenteeism. Like just because your people are there and they're at work doesn't mean they're actually working or they're productive.
I call it, some people go to work and they sit and quit.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
But, I think the other thing too, Dave, is important, is leadership is a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted. And the genius is in the end. And people who work for organizations where people are too tough-minded, they feel vulnerable and at risk. Where they work in an organization that's too tender-hearted, they feel vulnerable and at risk. So you've got to get in that middle place where you're both tough-minded and tender-hearted, because leaders need to have a backbone of steel but a heart of gold. But it's tough. It's not an easy game. Leadership is a contact sport, and which is really important.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love that tough-minded but tender-hearted. So obviously strong in terms of the determination, but that empathy and that compassion for human beings as well. And it's a tough balance, but when you can get it right, and once again, even as leaders, just because you're a leader doesn't mean you're going to get it right every time, that you're not perfect. You need to be tough-minded and tender-hearted on yourself as well at times.
Yeah, you have to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love when you mentioned focus. I find, I've done a lot of work, studied like why do some organizations execute at a far greater rate than other organizations. I looked at my clients and studied a bunch of other organizations, and I created what I call fast execution. And the first letter F is for focus. So they have this innate focus on what matters most. They're very clear about the things that matter most. And then they have a system of accountability where, of course, then everybody knows who's responsible for what, where, and when. They keep the plan simple, right, to execute on, and then T is for transparency. Everybody can see what everybody's working on. So when you focus on accountability, simplicity, and transparency, you will execute at a far greater rate. And if you're doing that on top of a powerful culture where people are engaged and feel respected, and we're all better together, well, then you're going to thrive in the future.
I often say, Dave, that some people camouflage issues with confusion to make out how smart they are. So, don't camouflage issues with confusion. You're right. Clearly defined goals are so important. Transparency, know where we are. We have in our company, we have our strategic drivers, but then we have our must-win battles. Here are our 5 must-win battles. Here's how we'll measure them. And, I think it's sick to think that as when companies went virtual, some people were actually tracking when they were on their computer to see if they were working. If you had to do that now, the game's over, baby. Forget it.
Yeah. You've already lost. Get out of here.
Get out.
Yeah.
You're a loser.
Yeah. Let's say you're type A soul-sucking CEO guy. That's the guy who spies on people and wants to make sure that everyone's on their computers. And you get the behavior that you reward. So all of a sudden people are like, I'm just going to log on to my computer, and they can see I'm just sit there, and as long as my computer's logged on, I'm good. They don't trust me anyway, so I'll just do what I can, create confusion in reverse, and that's not good for anybody. Nobody wins in that. Now I've got one more question to ask you, but Shiv has just put up there. If I could ask Garry one question, describe in one sentence, who am I, Garry blank blank. I don't know if you can answer.
I'm the consciously incompetent, probably right and roughly wrong servant leader whose purpose it is to help people get an A.
There you go, Shiv. If that's a great. I still love that so much. I might have to steal that with glee at some stage. All right, Garry. I have one last question to ask, which wasn't in the pre-information that I sent you about the podcast. I have a series of random questions from 1 to 31, and all you have to do is pick a number from 1 to 31, and whatever that question is the number you pick.
29.
29. All right. Oh, okay. This is pretty right in your wheelhouse. Who is the most impressive world leader, and why?
Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
And why?
Yeah.
Because he changed, by being a true servant leader, he changed the fabric of South Africa, because it wasn't about him. It was about those that he served. And I think Nelson Mandela.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Garry, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and participating in the Evolution of Business show and kicking off season 2. It's been an absolute treat to dialogue with you, and I've learned so much myself from our conversation as a leadership guy and a purpose guy and everything like that, and a culture person. Like all the things you talk about, it just speak to my heart and my soul of the work that I do in the world today. how can people get hold of you, contact? Where can they follow you, find out more about you, so I can make sure that everyone gets that?
I'm on LinkedIn, so just search me, Garry Ridge at LinkedIn. I have a website. It's www.thelearningmoment, all one word, .net.
Thelearningmoment.net.
Yeah. And
beautiful.
and I post blogs on there, and I publish articles on LinkedIn. So,
yeah. The and once again, does WD-40 own the website address, the domain www.d40.com?
WD40.com.
No, but just w.d40.com, because it's already got all the W's in front. Yes, again, like you guys should quickly grab that if you this is a yeah. I remember, like, in Canada, and I'll just wrap up with this here. But have you ever your Canadian Tire? You ever heard of Canadian Tire?
Oh yeah,
store?
One of our largest customers.
Okay, yeah. So in Canada, its nickname is Crappy Tire, right? Mm-hmm. So they secured the domain name, www.crappytire.com or .ca, embracing the way the organization or people joke about Canadian Tire.
It's amazing organization.
Yeah, it is. It's such a and they created their own currency and everything like that, which was quite fascinating. I remember as a kid, like, that was so good, because as a kid we'd get Canadian Tire money, and it was like more important than our allowance, because we had all this, our parents would always give us the Canadian Tire money that we could go in there eventually and buy things, and it was always a great thing. Mate, thank you so much again for coming on the show here. I know you've got a 3.5 billion market cap organization to run, and people to care and love, and really appreciate you sharing all your wisdom with us today, and continuing to do the great work that you're doing in the world. And it's awesome that leaders can have role models like yourself to hope to shine some light on the importance of caring, and actually, well, I call it care and give a shit actually about the people that are willing to trade their day to spend with you to help you do something amazing in the world. So value and honor that, and it's certainly something that you've done extremely well and continue to do. And share that with the world. So thank you so much on behalf of everybody for the work that you're doing, mate.
Thank you. Great to be with an Aussie, well, a Canadian Aussie anyhow.
I call myself a Kanazi. I've got a meat pie and a hockey puck. Yeah.
Good for you. Cheers now.
All right. See you, everybody. Take care.